Warm greetings, dear ones, and welcome to worship at Unity Church. Welcome to this time we set aside each week to help us find and keep our balance, to think about those things that matter most, to root out racism in ourselves and in the world, and to align our lives to integrity, service, and joy. As we reach out from the sanctuary, we too miss being together in person. Despite the limitations, we hope that you will enter in as fully as you can. So light a chalice, speak, and sing along. Call out the names of those in need. But let worship have its way with you until we are together again. After the service, whether this is your first time with us or you've been with us your whole life, you're invited to participate in a virtual Zoom coffee hour where we share a bit of our lives with each other and get to know one another more deeply. Stay for just a few minutes or stay up to 45 minutes to connect in smaller breakout rooms. If you would like to learn more about Unity Church-Unitarian and Unitarian Universalism, we invite you to participate in Finding Yourself at Unity today at 1 o'clock. This week's 1-hour online class will be hosted by the Reverend Karen Herring, and she will share information about Unity's social justice and community outreach ministries. If you're interested in learning more about the financial landscape of Unity Church, including the 2021 budget that is to be presented to the congregation at the annual meeting, please join Barbara Hubbard today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Zoom. Then next Saturday, November the 21st, please join us online for the annual meeting of the congregation at 10 a.m., where the board will report to the congregation, present the 2021 budgets, and ask the congregation to elect 3 new trustees. This week, the board will also present the slate of candidates and open the voting for the election to the ministerial search team. So please watch your email for the ballot. This coming Wednesday, November the 18th at 7 o'clock in the evening, we invite you to team up to learn about anti-racism. This program offers easy entry into finding anti-racism books, podcasts, and videos, as well as discussion partners to discuss these matters. Information about all of these offerings shared this morning is available on Unity's homepage. Next Sunday, as we experience this holiday of grace and gratitude in new and unpredictable ways, Reverends Jan and Rob Eller Isaacs will explore the ways that we can receive grace and pass it along. Once again, welcome to Unity Church.
It's not easy for me to wrap my mind around the concept of grace, perhaps because I also struggle with the concept of the divine, and because a religious humanism is at the core of my personal belief system. So for me, grace isn't about divine love or a deity granting forgiveness of my sin, but about the love to which all humans are entitled because we have inherent worth and dignity. But understanding grace as the passive acceptance of that love as our due doesn't quite capture its meaning either. What I think helps me understand grace is an analogy. The Roman philosopher Seneca told us that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Well, maybe I think grace is what happens when our entitlement to be loved meets our willingness to be actively open to that love. Grace is what happens when our inherent worth meets our willingness to change and turn toward ever greater, ever transforming love, even when doing so is hard or requires sacrifice. Maybe grace only makes sense in the context of relationship, of mutuality, of transformation. And it occurs to me that Unity Church is a container for that transformation. This brave and sacred space is where we are invited to practice giving and receiving, to practice love in ways that both ground and elevate us. Come, let us worship together.
Please join us in singing the opening hymn, Who Would True Valor See, number 106.
Who would true valor see? Let them come hither. One here will constant be. Come wind, come weather. There's no discouragement shall make me once relent. My first avowed intent to be a pilgrim. Whoso beset me round with dismal stories do but themselves confound, my strength the more is. No lion can be fright, I'll with a giant fight, but I shall have a right to be a pilgrim. No word of foe or friend can daunt my spirit. I know I at the end will life inherit. Then fancies fly away, I'll not fear what they say. I'll labor night and day to be a pilgrim.
Please join me in our unison affirmation from The Cost of Discipleship. Cheap grace means grace sold on the market like cheap Jack's wares. The sacraments, the forgiveness of sin, and the consolations of religion are thrown away at cut prices. The essence of grace, we suppose, is that the account has been paid in advance, and because it has been paid, everything can be had for nothing. Costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, a person will go and sell all that they have. It is the pearl of great price to buy, for which the merchant will sell all his goods. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must knock. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow. It is costly because it costs a person their life, and it is grace because it gives them the only true life. Please join us in a moment of silence.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, those who care for family members in ill health, those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days, and by those who rise above heartbreak to challenge oppression in all of its forms. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation, as together we live into our longing to embody and help to build the beloved community. Will you pray with me for all these we now name? We send our deep care and best wishes to Kevin Harris, who is undergoing heart surgery this week at Mayo Clinic. We hope and pray for an uncomplicated recovery. We also hold Tim Haney, who has entered hospice, in our prayer, as well as Jackie Smith and her mother Roberta and the wider circle of family who have been caring and journeying with Tim. We celebrate with Vernon Sowell, our Director of Finance, whose teaching and ministry with the Minnesota Graduate School of Theology Berean Academy of Higher Learning culminates now in his ordination to ministry in the Berean Missionary Baptist Church we send our blessings and hearty congratulations. And we are thrilled to announce the birth of one more Redeemer, Julian Paul Mitchell, and his parents, Claire and Casey Mitchell, are settling into their new family life. Grandparents Diane and Peter Grassi, after careful quarantining, are providing support and lots of cuddles. Love abounds. Lastly, we acknowledge all the currents of grief flowing all over the planet as lives are compromised or lost to the coronavirus. Every day, we know the larger numbers of people who are getting sick, striking our communities of color disproportionately, some of whom are struggling to recover, some whose lives are lost to the virus. Every day, the grief grows. So may we each light a candle of healing, memorializing all that has been lost, and for those finding their way back to an altered life. May we stand in compassionate solidarity with our neighbors here, at home, and all around the world. May they and may we be instruments of a just and lasting peace. I now invite you to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those you would like to lift today in worship. And will you pray with me? O Holy One, source of strength and faith for this turning moment in the world, we watch for hopes and longings as we move along the precarious path of this fiercely difficult moment. We have come to pray, to listen more closely for a deeper wisdom that may come for just a time as this. For a voice that does not falsely soothe or offer the evasion of distractions or some ineffective state of mind. Rather, a voice that touches the very heart of our pain and loss and offers not an answer, but rather an invitation to touch life as we have not touched before. We pray that heartbreak and all that feels broken in this moment might painfully reveal what we truly love and care deeply enough to give of ourselves, no matter the cost. Grant us faith and grace strong enough that sets us again to plant seeds and tend to love's work, no matter the odds and however long it takes, to see that there is an unaccountable beauty not divisible neatly into the good and the bad or the right and wrong, and that just to touch that beauty and grace will make all the difference. Holy One, in this turning moment, when the road bends beyond what we are able to see, when the promise feels weighted by so many risks, help us to know that it has always been to such long odds that faith has always given itself, and that in the wrestling, in the waiting, we will find our blessing. May it be so, and amen.
Please join in singing Spirit of Life, number 123.
Winter is coming, and apparently there's nothing we can do about it. But that's okay, because there's hockey. And I love hockey. And I got my love of hockey from my dad, who also loved hockey, and who was a rink rat growing up. And he told us lots of stories about his days down at the rink, and I want to tell you one of those right now. So as I say, my dad was a rink rat, and he loved to skate. And to hear him talk about it, he was a rocket skating around the ice with his blades glistening and flying with the wind through his hair. And he was fast as could be. And to hear him tell it also, he never lost a race. Now I want to tell you, my dad was not a braggart. As a matter of fact, he was a shy, somewhat awkward and calm young man, but not on the ice. On the ice, he was something special. Now, at the rink, the neighborhood where he grew up in Stillwater, Minnesota, they would every week have a race. And on New Year's, they would have a special race, a big race where the winner actually won a trophy. And my dad had won this trophy as a 10-year-old and as an 11-year-old, and now as a 12-year-old. He was confident that he was going to win a third for the three-peat. He had a decent pair of skates, which was his biggest treasure. He came from a poor family. This was the Depression, but they knew Rodney needed those skates. So, as confident as he was in his skating, the one thing that he felt bad about was that his parents, they didn't come down and watch him skate. They were of a heavy work ethic sort, and they felt like they didn't have time to do that. They always needed to work. And so this particular year, this New Year's, even on New Year's, they couldn't come down to see him. But he was still confident. And before the race, he stretched out his legs and he checked out his competition, and he could see it was the usual group of 12-year-olds, his fellow sixth graders, Charlie and Billy and Pookie and Sven, and a few girls, and no one he felt he couldn't beat. But there was one wild card. There was one kid, a new kid, an Italian kid by the name of Dean or Dino. He was never sure if that was his real name or his nickname. But Dino, he knew, was built like an athlete and was a good athlete on the playground. But could he skate? Do Italians skate? Well, my dad scoffed at this and felt there was nothing really between him and the trophy. He did note that Dino had a large cheering section, a family, big family, parents, brothers and sisters, probably a few aunts and uncles, grandma and grandpa, probably Catholics, big family. And the Swedes and the Norwegians that made up the town of Stillwater at that time were politely standing and giving polite cheers for their kids, while the Italian family was jumping up and down and waving their flags and waving their mufflers. And as my dad looked at this group, they were dressed a little odd. They didn't seem to be dressed appropriately for a cold winter. They were wearing dress shoes instead of boots. And he scoffed at this and thought, there's no way this outsider is going to take my trophy. And so the starter called them to the starting line. And they lined up, and they tried to look like the speed skaters that they had seen in magazines and newspapers. And the starter had a starter's pistol. This is big time, okay? And he fires off the starter's pistol, and off they go. And the race starts just the way my dad wants it to start. He manages not to get stuck behind any of the slow people. He doesn't go for the front right away, because you don't have to start in front. You can let other people set the pace and burn out. He knows what he's doing. And the race starts just the way he wants. And as they start to pass the backside of the oval, this is 3 times around the lake, as they start to pass on that first time, he knows he's right where he wants to be. There's 3 or 4 guys up in front of him. The rest of the pack is a little behind. The stragglers are back. And Rod is at the front. Rodney is my dad's name, is at the front of this group, right where he wants to be. Everything's going fine. He wonders, where's Dino? And he turns to look, and he doesn't see him. Where is this guy? When he looks over his right shoulder, and who's next to him but Dino? pumping along, arms and legs going wildly, but right there, amazing. And as they come towards the finish line the first time, the crowd's going wild. Of course, the Italian family really going wild, jumping up and down, the rest all calling and yelling. And Rod knows, we're good, we're going good. So they go past the finish line and they start the second lap. And in the second lap, things start to go the way Rod runs this race. And he knows he is now at the front of the pack. The four are still in front of him, but they're starting to fall back. Some of them are starting to lose their energy, and Rod is moving up and moving up. And as they come across the backside the second time, he is starting to move past Charlie. And Billy is within his sights. And everything is great, and he can still see the crowd over there going crazy. And then he hears over his right shoulder again this scraping sound, and he looks, and there is Dino still there with these choppy strokes, his legs pumping in his short strides. Well, Rod knows how to do this, so his strides are long and smooth, and he just floats over the ice like he wants to. And as they come across the finish line the second time around, there are fewer of the families that are jumping up and down as they step back and know it's appropriate to just politely nod, politely clap. But that Italian family is jumping up and down and going nuts. This bothers Rod, and he knows soon it is time to make the move. And so as they go on the third lap, the third and final lap, he makes his move, and he comes up upon the next one. Pook passes him, and all there is in front of him now is Billy. And Billy looks back at him as they pass the middle part of the far side, and he says, "Go away, get away, get away." But there's no stopping him. And he kicks wildly, and Rod moves past him, moving swiftly like a rocket, along with Dino. So now they're coming across the final stretch, and he can see the finish line. And he has to give it to this guy, that this guy is, even though he doesn't really know how to skate, isn't really truly meant to be here, he is giving it his all, and he's gonna stick with it. But Rod also knows at this point, and he says to us every time he tells this story, and I've heard it dozens of times, he says, it's that point that I knew I'm going to crush this kid. And so we, his kids, go, yes, go, Dad, go, beat him, beat him. But you know, I've heard this story dozens and dozens of times, and I know that that's not what happens. And I know that this is why Dad told this story. Because coming towards that finish line, my dad is feeling something. He's feeling upset that his folks aren't there. He feels bad about that. He feels like, that's not fair. He feels irritated in that family that's jumping up and down, pulling for this upstart. But he also feels something for him too. He feels something he can't quite say in his heart about the effort this kid, this graceless kid who does not really know how to do this, the effort he's giving. And right when he knows that this is the time when the athlete's heart kicks in, we've heard about that, the heart of an athlete, where it kicks in and it digs down and it takes everything and it just goes and does it and wins. At that point, his heart is full of wondering how he feels about the fact that all of those other parents out there have now started cheering for him so that he will beat this Dino. And he's wondering about that. And it's tying him up. And so right at this point, when the heart has to go, it just doesn't. And in that final set of strides, a couple of yards from the finish line, he just doesn't give it. And Dino passes him. And he wins. And that's it. And so the trophy is given to Dino. His family goes jumping up and down. An aunt and uncle come up to my dad and pat him on the back and say, "Good job." Rod looks at Dino. They smile and nod their heads at each other. And a couple of my dad's friends come and punch him on the shoulder and said, "You had it, Rod, you had it." And me as a kid, I would listen to this over and over again and go, That's exciting. That was an exciting story, but so unsatisfying. And I would say, so Dad, you let him win. And he said, I never said that. I never said that. And it was hard to figure out what happened. And what I think is his heart was just so full of what? Compassion. I think it was compassion at that moment that Dad would then say, winning just didn't feel relevant. Didn't feel necessary. And I said, but it's not fair. And he said, it was fair. And I just know that story has always made me feel like my dad. He was a winner.
Each year in the autumn, the church asks that we renew our financial support by pledging to the operating and capital needs of the church. This morning, we celebrate our progress. As of today, just under $1.25 million has been pledged. That's 92% of the way toward our goal of $1.35 million. If most of those who made a pledge last year renew their pledges for 2021, we will meet and perhaps even exceed that goal. Please respond as soon and as generously as you can. You can even make a pledge online during the offering interlude. Your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. Though the future is unclear, we can't let fear undermine the strength of the ministry we share. So please do your best to be generous with the church so that the church can, in turn, maintain our staff and programs and keep our promises to the many community partners our Sunday offering support. Today, the larger portion of our offering will go to MORE, a nonprofit organization that works to provide recent refugees and immigrants with the education and cultural support needed to become fully engaged members of their new communities. It offers financial counseling, work preparedness, communication and language skills, along with access to household items, clothing, and food resources. This collection will support family advocacy visits focused on energy assistance, unemployment benefits, affordable health care, and voter registration. Unity Church member Kathy Arucci is MORE's executive director. So during the offering interlude, please visit Unity's homepage and follow the link in the order of service section. You can also mail in a check or use the Give function in Unity's membership app. Thank you for your generous support.
Those winter Sundays. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold, then with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?
What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? From the Good Samaritan to the prodigal son, parables in the Bible literally place one reality alongside another, teaching by means of wonder and surprise, and yes, for me, sheer exasperation. Far from making things clearer and helping us to understand, parables seem deliberately set out to confuse us, less to illumine and more to subvert and pop every circuit breaker in our minds. Parables take a puzzling fable, and rather than offering a clearer, simpler meaning, parables drive it for all it's worth to the point of supremely vexing non-comprehension. Like a Zen Buddhist koan, parables sneak in like camouflaged questions without authorized access, and then go about hacking every expectation, subverting our very reality. Here's one of the most confounding of parables for me. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who had a vineyard that needed harvesting. So very early in the morning, he went out into the marketplace and hired some workers, agreeing to pay them 1 denarius, equivalent to a day's wage. And then he sent them to work in the vineyard. About mid-morning, he went out to the marketplace again and saw others standing around whom no one had hired yet. Even though a third of the day has already passed, he asked them to go work for him in the vineyard, telling them that he would pay them what's right. At noon, when he went back downtown again, saw still others hanging out on the street corner, and invited them to come and work in his vineyard, telling them that he would pay them what's right. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you guessed it, he was back downtown and spied a couple of straggly-looking young workers with nothing to do, and even though the sun was beginning to move to the far west, he hired them, promising to pay them, yes, what's right. Finally, at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon of the workday, he went down Main Street and back to town once again. There was almost no one left loitering on the street corners because the day was almost over. But he found just a few more people leaning up against the wall of the unemployment office, even though it was only 1 hour before quitting time. He hired them, says the parable, and put them to work in the vineyard, promising to pay them what's right. So if you've been keeping score, by the end of the day, we have 5 different groups of workers in the vineyard. Those who had been working for nearly 12 hours, for 9 hours, for 6, for 3, and the last group, just 1 hour. And now it's time to get their paychecks. If you recall, a specific wage was agreed upon only for those who are hired first, 1 denarius. But this employer has some unusual labor practices. He pays those who got to the vineyard last first. And to everyone's astonishment, he pays those who have worked just 1 hour that day a denarius, a full day's wage. So the guys who have worked for 12 long hours, sweating in the vineyard all day long, you know it, they are absolutely thinking they will be getting 12 denarii. If he pays the latecomers 1 denarius for just 1 hour's work, then those who arrived at dawn are surely going to get 12 times as much. But before they can finish the calculation in their heads, the employer has paid them all of them, 1 denarius, 1 denarius, 1 denarius, whether they came at dawn and worked all day long or showed up to work for just 1 hour. There are murmurings of injustice and unfair labor practices. Is this any way to run a business? It doesn't seem right. This is actually quite scandalous. Like most people, they have an innate sense of what is fair and what is unfair. Equal pay for equal work is fair. Equal pay for unequal work, that's not fair. Rewarding those who do most of the work is fair. Rewarding those who do the least is not fair. Treating everyone the same, that's fair. Treating everyone the same when they actually are not the same, that doesn't seem fair. This is not how meritocracy is supposed to work in the world. I worked hard to get to the top through talent and effort, using means available to everyone and anyone to get into the Ivy Leagues, nail my job interview, and I deserve what I deserve. And this is the darker side of the meritocratic story. If other people would just do what I did, what anyone can do, well, they could have exactly what I have. The poor, they have no excuses. They deserve what they've gotten. The political philosopher Michael Sandel observes in his book, The Tyranny of Merit, that the idea that people get what they deserve or should get what they deserve is baked deep in our social consciousness. America is, after all, the land of opportunity, the land where penniless paupers wash ashore and can make their millions with nothing but the strength of their backs and the brains to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But meritocracy has more ancient roots than this American dream of equal opportunity. A deep vein in every human civilization has always thought that somewhere, somehow, there must be some sort of order that would reward everyone on the basis of our merits and similarly punish us for the faults committed and accumulated. Before it became a socioeconomic dogma, Meritocracy was for centuries a religious and theological doctrine of good works to earn our way into paradise, of obtaining enough merits to be declared a saint, promoting that dichotomy between saints and sinners, even as the church confessed that we have all fallen short of the glory of God. But meritocracy spread beyond religious debates, forgetting the doctrinal disputes of Paul and Augustine, Pelagius and Luther along the way. Meritocracy entered the modern world and the classrooms of political philosophy and economics and business schools and college admissions offices, where the merits and demerits of an individual could now be quantifiable, measurable, sortable on every scale equally, so that each person got their equal due, no more, no less, accurate to the number of hours worked in the vineyard. We could finally emerge from the twin evils of privileged aristocracy and that ideological flat egalitarianism. Now, with meritocracy presenting itself and continuing to present itself as a much superior form of justice and equality. And so, how ironic that meritocracy, presented as a means of fighting inequality, has today come to serve as the ethical justification for countless inequalities. I worked hard to get where I am, worked hard and long in the vineyard since sunrise, and I deserve everything that's coming to me. Buried in that credo may be a few truths, but there are far more lies than there are truths. Chronicled and researched across many aspects of society, you and I know that the game is fixed. The hustle of meritocracy presumes the fiction of an equal playing field when it simply does not exist and never did. We enter into life's drama not of our own making, born into circumstances we did nothing to deserve, with advantages and disadvantages in which we had no choice. It turns out that it's less about pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps than the buddies we know and the bribes that might pave the way. But I think there's something more. When those who have believe they merit what they have, and the have-nots merit what they have not, then being a winner becomes more than about money, more than how many denarii we are owed. Meritocracy stands in as a status symbol of personal virtue, our hard work, cultivated talent, ambition. And so being a loser becomes itself a symbol of stupidity, laziness, and the humiliation that losers rightly deserve. No surprise that the politics of humiliation and grievance surrounds us everywhere today. An ideological commitment to the fiction of merit is at the heart of populist discontent, argues Sandel. Yes, we have xenophobia, misogyny, racism, classism, nationalism, uneven globalization, and so many more things. But there is another underlying logic that tethers these forces together in a cocktail of contempt and condescension. It is not only that the urban, educated, technocrats and the globalists who have won, that they are somehow rich and the most qualified, the most credentialed and esteemed. It is that the doctrine of meritocracy means that we are finally freed from any responsibility towards the poor, because poverty is nothing other than their own failure to capitalize on equal opportunity. The poor have no one to blame but themselves, and whatever form of welfare or Affordable Health Care Act, they should just be done away with. And we will all go to sleep peacefully on the beds we have made on our own merits. Meritocracy is anti-gospel, as it insidiously distorts our vision of our neighbor. It engenders anxiety that clings to fear-mongering and embraces a criminal justice system and border walls and deportations that would safeguard us from them. Meritocracy legitimizes rhetoric toward the other as super predators, animals, thugs, and rapists. Legislatively, meritocracy seduces us into supporting policies that would racially target and profile, with law and order as the only commonsensical way to respond to these criminals. Meritocracy endorses and actively participates in the largest prison system in the history of the world, seemingly with little concern that law and order, devoid of any grace, is not justice, it's vengeance. Meritocracy is anti-gospel. Because how can we ever have a sense that we owe anything to one another if we're all getting precisely, exactly what we deserve, without some notion of grace, of something unmerited and larger at work than what we can control? Why would we even bother to think about interdependence? Why would we even care about any notion of the common good? If there is to be grace, it will be costly, because it will ask us to see how deeply this doctrine of meritocracy is ingrained in our consciousness, and to exorcise its power over us. If there is to be grace, it will be costly, because it will ask us to see that the foundations of meritocracy rest upon equality. The equality of Lady Justice, who is blindfolded and does not care to be bothered by the particular happenstance of being white or black, immigrant or native, resident of the global north or from the global south, a legacy applicant to an Ivy League, or the first generation to apply to college. A form of equality in principle that is absolutely blind to the actual circumstance of those who could only come to work in the vineyard because they had to take care of children and the aged. A form of equality blind to the particularity of those who could do more in 1 hour's work than what others may do in 6 hours. A form of equality blind to those who bring into the vineyard more than manual labor, but the gift of song, and camaraderie and joy that dignifies work. Meritocracy, blinded by its abstract notion of some equality principle, fails to see our neighbor in the fullness and particularity of their actual lived lives, of where they live and what they eat and how they dance and how they parent their children. Grace does not categorically reject equality. Only that equality does not see well enough to know when treating people the same, who are never the same and equal to begin with, actually harms them. Grace asks us to pay closer attention to diversity rather than equality. Grace does not say that there is no one deserving of any merit, but rather reveals an interdependence where we had largely assumed our own merit. There has always been interdependence. Grace asks us to pay closer attention to inclusion and the merit that belongs to the many. For grace is unmerited generosity, for it is grace that transforms equality into equity. The owner of the vineyard made an agreement to pay 1 denarius only with those who were hired first and worked the full day. Everyone else was promised what's right. The scandal of the parable may be that what's right turned out to be actually something unfair and contrary to the doctrine of meritocracy and equality. But if the parable is mostly about getting a denarius, a day's wage, that's nothing to write home about as far as parables go. Giving the workers what's right may point to something far more scandalous than a day's wage, because what the parable seems mainly concerned about is the comings and goings of the owner of the vineyard. The radical and incomprehensible logic of the owner of the vineyard, who repeatedly and tirelessly goes out looking to hire anyone and everyone who is left out, no matter who they are or time of day, and whatever it takes. A logic of inclusion as radical as the one we call the beloved community. In the parable, giving people what's right has little to do with a denarius, but with the owner's repeated and unrelenting call for everyone to be included. He wouldn't quit calling, hiring, inviting, welcoming, offering a place in the vineyard, deserving or not. And there's maybe even one further scandalous suggestion in the parable. For the owner of the vineyard will not rest until every part of us has been included in the vineyard. Not just the accomplished, beautiful, looks good on the resume parts of us. Those are the parts of us that were easily welcomed. They came in first. They were the first hired to be in the vineyard. But there are parts of us that are undocumented, parts of us that shame us, that we would rather hide in the shadows, afraid, broken, rooms in the house of intersectionality that have always been closed off, and yet hoping that someone someday might come and offer the whole of us grace. Because that's what costly and scandalous grace does. Persistently, unfairly, equitably seeking us out, every one of us, every part of us, in all our radical diversity, right up to the midnight hour, until we find ourselves together in beloved community. May it be so, and amen. And will you join together now in our closing hymn?
Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land, do you hear, in the heights on the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain, do you hear, through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush, do you hear in the hush of your soul, hear the cry, hear the still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh starting trill in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear all the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers? They are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear,
Friends, it's about proximity. It has always been about intimacy. From the distance of meritocracy to equality that calls us just a little closer, and ultimately to equity that sees us in all that we are. So may costly grace call us in our ministry to invite all into beloved community. May it be so, and amen.
you.